Hey everybody, welcome to the Home Care Forum podcast with your hosts, Sasha, Guillaume, and Emina Poricanin. We have a special guest here today. I could do the introduction this week, but I'm going to leave it to Emina to introduce Alyssa Lovelace. Alyssa, or sorry, I so want to introduce Emina. Please go ahead.
Well, it's our pleasure to welcome Alyssa Lovelace to this week's episode. Alyssa has been an advocate and lobbyist, even though that is not the commonly used term, but a government relations person, professional in Albany in the home care, long-term care, health care continuum for, I'm not going to put a number on it, but many, many years. Very experienced, knowledgeable. It is our pleasure to welcome her to our studio today as our guest to share some information about really current federal and state legislative issues, developments. We regularly talk about those, and it is our pleasure to have this perspective, this lobbying side of things in the House today. And Alyssa will also tell us about some of the initiatives that she's been involved in, grassroots efforts by different provider groups who are interested in possibly forming new association and a voice for providers. So exciting things on today's episode. Alyssa, welcome.
Thank you so much, Emina. I'm so glad to be here with you guys finally.
So with that introduction, why don't you
Well, thank
kind of go into your resume a bit, where you've been, what you're working on now, if you want to speak about the kinds of advocacy that you're doing right now, what kind of clients, what kind of sectors you're in, please.
Sure. I've had the pleasure of knowing both of you for quite a long time now. But I started way back when I was 19 years old when I started as an intern with Leading Age New York. And I've never left the government relations sector. And primarily, I've always been in long-term care or home care. I might be a familiar face to some because I was at the Home Care Association, of course, and Healthcare Providers Association. And I ended up venturing out on my own because I thought that I could make a bigger difference working with providers directly and enhancing their public policy and government relations agendas. I always found it interesting that, only some of the providers that were members had lobbyists, and I wanted to be a resource to them, to the smaller guys, the medium-sized guys. And I've been able to do that, and I've been very blessed in being able to do that, working still with nursing homes, with home care agencies. I always have kept my foot in there while also branching out into other industries as well, including finance and the energy sectors, which I never thought I'd be able to do. But I've decided that if I can learn home care on a whim, then I can learn anything else, because home care is ever changing, as you both know. And it's just diving into the deep end of the pool and, having to sink or swim. And actually, if you remember Claudia Hammer, she used to say that to me at HCP, you got to dive in and just learn it and figure it out. And, I'm trying to do that with providers right now. And the ones who don't always get to have access to lobbyists, as you call us, government affairs consultants, what have you. It's always been my thought that everybody should be part of an association and, have as much representation as possible. And, I think that the world is changing, right? Home care is changing, the political environments are changing, and I think now is the time for maybe industry to change a little bit too.
Great, all great points. And why don't we stick to that topic, right? So, can you talk to us about what successful lobbying looks like, what's missing in the industry? Yeah, let's start there, and then we can add on to the questioning.
Cohesiveness, maybe. That has just been, now that I'm an outsider looking in, and I do represent a home care provider as well. Having watched everything happen in the CDPAP space over the last couple of years, what we saw with Fair Pay with home care, there's multiple associations. Everybody has different missions and agendas, and everybody wants to have a say, right? But where is the continuity, if you will, across the different proposals that are out there? And, are we really aligning properly? Is the messaging cohesive? We have to take a look at what's happening at the federal level. We have to take a look at, maybe what the plans are doing. And we all have to come to the table together and have those difficult conversations. And I know that's not something that everybody wants to do, but I think in order to get there, you have to have those conversations.
I guess that this could possibly be the same question coming at a different angle, but can you discuss what ineffectiveness in lobbying looks like? Because, it's not as if, and we can talk about the CDPAP, right? There were efforts made, it just wasn't effective. We know little collaboration, even when there was collaboration, there were pods of collaboration. So let's talk about the ineffectiveness of lobbying and advocacy sometimes.
I would say that whole issue was done before budget was done, right? We knew the governor had this proposal on the table. We knew that the division of budget, agreed with her, wanted to do it. They're doing it in other states. We can save money here too. DOH seemed to be all in, and they really buckled down at the end, right? We're seeing their ads all on TV now, and nobody really backtracked. And we're seeing that now as post-budget with these bills coming out, trying to redo everything that was done already. And I think that, when I work with my clients, if I'm being told by the governor's office, listen, we're done, this is shut, I'm not wasting any more of my clients' time. Like, we will come to the table when we need to come to the table, and we'll have our one-on-one meetings, and we will show what we're going to do to the legislators and to DOH and how we can be a helpful partner. But it doesn't always work really going to the mat with the governor and DOH. And I think we saw a lot of that, and DOH didn't appreciate it. And I imagine the governor's office didn't either.
Alyssa, the CDPAP fiasco is frankly still a fiasco, in my opinion. Folks, especially now with the introduction of bills by individual senators, are questioning whether it's worthwhile to re-engage in advocacy in support of this legislation with the governor's office directly. I mean, I always have to have this conversation about a bill doesn't mean that it's going to get passed. It is one of many ideas, right? It's been formalized in the form of a bill. It could die a bill, and most of them do die a bill. They never become a law. Can you talk a little bit about these proposals, what your own personal perspective is on the likelihood of them being passed, and whether, kind of to the point about what's a successful, unsuccessful initiative, how to spend your time, how to spend your advocacy resources? If you had a budget and you were an FI, like, would you even spend any time on this? Just generally, I would be very grateful for your feedback, as I think would our listeners.
We have 12 days left, maybe 15, because they're going to add a couple of days on because they spent so much time negotiating the budget this year. The bill's moving in the Senate. It has not moved out of the Assembly, and the committee process is supposedly shutting down this week. They leave tomorrow. So unless it ends up on a health agenda or a rules report and then magically gets to the floor by next week, I don't see it happening. Say it magically passed in both houses, okay? Is the governor going to sign it? Because this was done in the budget. There's clearly a fiscal impact, a large fiscal impact. She's going to veto it, and that's it, right? So, and in my opinion, should it have been done in the budget? Yeah, because it has a fiscal impact, and that's what they'll say, right? But it wasn't a priority of the legislature then, right? And now all of a sudden it is. So are the leadership teams going to bring it to the floor for a vote when they didn't want to bring it, put it in the budget? I mean, it's kind of like reading the room, mimicking what happened in the budget. That being said, if you want to see it done, I think the way to go would be in the budget, of course, and have, meet with leadership, come to Albany. And I'm not just talking, your one day a year advocacy days, right? Or you meet with your legislators in their district throughout the summer, throughout the fall. You're meeting with programming council, you're meeting with the governor's office, you're showing a good faith effort and trying to be part of the process and not just reacting to it come January, reading the bills and saying, oh my gosh, this is so bad. By the time that happens, you're already too late to the game because they start working. The Department of Health agencies, they are putting together their budgets in October, November. The governor's office is expecting numbers and proposals, ideas from them around that time so she can build out her budget and react as well. So the time to really start the process, which I personally think it's going to die, both bills in the Senate and the Assembly, I don't believe they're going to pass. So the next step would be to work with the legislators throughout the summer, work with the agencies and the governor's office throughout the fall and get something included if possible. If they say it's a dead issue and they're not doing it, period, point blank, I think that's a different conversation, but it's always worth having the conversation, right? I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I just say, you're asking my opinion, I'm just giving it.
That's exactly what we wanted. And honestly, I don't think anybody who has been paying attention to the issue and has a good understanding, I don't think anybody expects these initiatives to pass. Sasha, did we say anything that was surprising here? Alyssa or I?
No, no, I don't think so. I mean, but I think there are many people who listen to us and speak to us who don't follow these things closely, right? That are hopeful. And is it am I hopeful because all my eggs are in this basket and I have to hope? No, that could be it. And, it's a sad predicament that a lot of people are in. I would kind of cling onto any bit of hope at this point.
Sorry, Sasha. I don't think that's not to say like you can bring this bill back. You can make amendments. You can work with the sponsors. You can refine it. You can say DOH, what we need to do something. I think maybe they'd acknowledge something has to be done. I don't really know, but I would be hopeful. How can we work together? How can we be proactive about this? And, I hope that the associate, I'm not tied to any association, right? So I hope that they're meeting with programming council, they're meeting with the governor's office, they're having these conversations, to tease something up. But I mean, I was disappointed when I saw, home care really didn't get much in the budget this year, right? Let alone that, anything else, a couple things, but not anything grand, not certainly not the wins, with fair pay a couple of years ago and increases like that. So I would say just start the process now, be reinvigorated, and know that the process to begin doing that starts sooner than later, even though the legislature is about to adjourn.
The one thing that I think about this Rivera and Paulin bill is that it authorizes additional entities to serve, right? So that's not, that's something that could possibly come up next year, right? At least there's a ripple in the pond. And then if you look at, and we haven't spoken about this for some time, right? Freedom Care ruling is due, what, in a week or two, which if they're successful, they may be allowed to participate. I heard that it's just them, not necessarily the industry. We signed on as an amicus to that. I'm hoping that it would extend to us. But yeah, I mean,
Well,
I think
you can't
yeah,
throw out something
yeah.
like that and not clarify it.
Sure. Well, that's your job. I mean, you're the
Let
lawyer.
let Okay, so let's get it straight, right? Freedom Care appealed to the appellate division. The appellate division very clearly said only Freedom Care. This stay, pending the appeal, Freedom Care may continue to operate as an FI. Okay, so that appeal is going to be decided, God knows when. Okay, that takes time. Freedom Care has multiple lawsuits pending. One of them may be decided in the future. That particular one will take a while, the one at the appellate division. So Freedom Care is allowed to continue operating. Good for them because they've made some, from a legal standpoint, I really respect the arguments that they're making in these lawsuits. So good for them for actually fighting this fight on behalf of the entire industry. Does that mean they're actually going to get their FI back? We know these plans are being defiant. We know that the plans are saying we're not giving you the authorization because we don't know how long this is going to last. In which case, I think Freedom Care should sue them for contempt court order for all of their damages that they're losing. Every hour that they're losing under that plan, they should sue. And the DOH is also being defiant, right? They're not really facilitating any of these court orders, not only the one involving Freedom Care, but the federal lawsuit, which Judge Black, that required multiple clarifications because the state was initially saying it's going to be short-lived. We're not going to do this. So there's victories and then there's practical realities. And as far as your ability to monetize on the Freedom Care decision, I think that's a stretch. Going in through CDPAP as an amicus to an appellate brief does not entitle you to the extension of the court order. I don't know what attorney is giving that advice to the industry, but I'm on the record that that is not even arguable. Okay, I'm sorry.
but
I know
no,
who
but
the
we
lawyer is representing
yeah.
the Amici.
No, that definitely is not advice that I'm receiving. That again, that's hope against hope. So we'll
That's just your
see.
hope. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
yes, exactly. Yes, let's get back to business, right? Let's talk about the bills on the floor, right? We'll go through them. I kind of want to go through them quickly and Alyssa just shoot them down so I don't
Please.
even have to talk about them. But
Okay.
if they're all dead in the water, just interrupt me and just say they're dead in the water. So there's a state aid for home health community needs by Webb and Paulin, some funding that they're hoping could continue. Nope, that's out. All right. CHA episodic care, Webb and Paulin amends the CHA Medicaid rate methodology, allowing adjustment in the rates for costs such as workforce. Yeah, I think yeah, more money after the budget is set.
All I can say is if there's a fiscal attached to it, even if it were to pass, it wouldn't be signed into law because that
Right.
gets done in the budget. I think that we've seen that time
Right.
and time again. And also keep in mind that some of these new bills, like those bills, they sit for a couple of years. You know, you have to gain support. They're not their typical sponsors.
Mhm.
I mean, granted, anybody can be a sponsor, but we're seeing new faces come to the game, right? And at the end of the day, leadership in each house needs to make it a priority for any of them to go anywhere.
Okay, so the mental health and home care collaboration, that seems like it should go through. There's no money there, I don't believe.
But it doesn't have a Senate sponsor, correct?
This is Senate Brooke.
Yep. Yeah, no, there's no Senate sponsor, I don't believe.
Okay.
That's been floated around for a few years and it hasn't gone anywhere.
All right. And community Medicaid and paramedics. Program support, which seems to be pushed by some associations. I think it's a fool's errand. Like, why are you inviting the wolves in?
Yeah, so
Like,
the community paramedicine bills are always interesting. The Rivera's bill just, I think, went through a committee. I think sometimes it passes the Senate, but it doesn't in the Assembly. And then it ends up becoming a budget issue. But I know that the community paramedicine, some home care providers, engage in this and others are like hands off, right? So I think that there's mixed industry input there.
that's not good. I mean, I can't see the benefit there. You're just opening yourself up to competition, which is fine, but not competition outside of the industry. So I don't like that. Lixa RFO repeal, Rivera Paulin, that's a no-go, which
I don't see.
is, yeah, listen, this is if you're not getting involved in advocacy, we will be bringing you opportunities to get involved in advocacy. This is the reason right here. We're just keep tuning in. We'll kind of leave breadcrumbs, or more than breadcrumbs. We're just going to point right at where you should go to advocate with us and join us in that. Next is the hospice workforce labor analysis in home care by Brunson and Assembly. Fund seeking recommendations to be made at the level of reimbursement. I mean, isn't this just the same story over and over again? A study for a study or a study?
If I think where they're coming from is in fact where they came from, they all have great intent and I think should be, and yes, you get buy-in, you make them standalone bills, you try to put them in the budget. That was always the theory in working on those. And at the end of the day, the goal is to get them in the budget. But again, if each house doesn't want to do it, then they fall off the table. And then, of course, if they have a fiscal, it's a vicious cycle if you're not following what I'm
Right.
saying.
Yeah.
You need buy-in, you need great support, and it's not just your health committees. You have to go outside of that. You have to go to Senate Finance. You have to go to Rules. You want to go to Ways and Means. You have to go to leadership. You have to talk to Program and Council. You want to talk to the governor's office. You're talking to everybody. Advocacy doesn't just stop with the sponsors and getting the bill introduced.
Okay.
And
We
or
talked.
just sending a letter every week. I'm a
Mhm.
firm believer. Pick up the phone, you call, you go to the district office, you invite the legislators to a home to see what is actually happening when it comes to care. So I think, as you continue to go down the list, I imagine I'll say in a few minutes.
Okay. We spoke about the looks.
There's
The
definitely a
service.
strategy to all of this.
Yes, there is. I think the strategy is know what's a budget issue, work sooner to get them in the budget, work with all hands on deck and show up repeatedly. And industry, and I mean industry, the actual providers, forge those relationships. Because if the legislators hear it, it's one thing if they hear it from me on behalf of my client 20 times, but when my client comes to Albany, they're like, oh, okay. Now he brings a different perspective.
Yeah.
Great point. Looks at statistical report. I mean, this just improves the filing process.
I have hope. I want to have hope in this. I don't believe it's gone anywhere yet in the assembly. The sponsors are great people. They're up and comers. I really have high hope for that bill, and I think it's an easy bill to get done. I'm holding out hope for it.
If this doesn't pass, forget it. This is a nothing bill, right? I think the problems are deeper, right? Home care has no standing in Albany if something like this can't pass.
Well, the good news
Uh,
is it's on the Senate calendar, so it just needs to be scheduled for debate and passage.
right. Okay. Last that I have is the home care educational material for veterans, which is collaboration, coordination, to develop training materials and education materials for veterans and their families. Again, I mean, this just makes sense. I mean, I guess there could be some budget, maybe some allocation for a study or what have you, but
It's funny, when it comes to study bills, they are usually vetoed and said they do have a fiscal impact. They do take staff time, put them in the budget. And then some of them make it in, some of them don't.
that's,
And then
well, I have,
or
yep.
discretion of the agency, to say, okay, we're going to do it or we're not going to do it. Again, I think that's a bill. The study bills, I think, are all great. The mental health bills, the Veterans Affair bills, I think their author is super smart and, really is trying to be innovative in the approach. But again, I think it's, those bills are going to take time.
All right, on the federal level, we've spoken about in the past, the House bill, the reconciliation bill is passed and is in the Senate. New York would lose or see a reduction of $13 billion over a 10-year period with the elimination of the MCO tax, which is a loophole tax by New York State to get additional monies from the federal government. It is estimated at 1.5 million New Yorkers who lose their healthcare coverage under the House bill. Now, let's, Alyssa, if you could help clarify, I don't know how solid these numbers are, but the last podcast we were talking about a 10 possible billion dollar shortfall in this budget year for New York, 10 billion plus. And I'm reading this 13 billion over a 10-year period. So it's a bit confusing where the what the monies and the fiscal implications are.
So I think when it comes to that, it is over a period of time. And you'll see that many of the budget monies are, multiple billions of dollars of investments over a 5-10 year period of time. So, and that's what they base their budgets off of, these large lump sums. So, and then they spread the wealth throughout the years, right? This particular issue was just conferenced last week in the legislature, I believe with the governor's staff. And basically the legislature is going to come back in October to fill this gap. What that means right now, I mean, we don't know when exactly they're going to come back, and we don't know exactly how much they're going to need to cut, whether it'll be retroactive. So I feel like if I gave you any sort of number or methodology, it could be wrong, because I don't think anybody really knows until we know. And it's unfortunate, but would I have done things differently? Maybe passing a budget? Yeah, I would have planned for this, right? But I think that the governor has been trying to play nice with our president. And, you see in the news that she's having conversations with him about multiple projects going on, particularly in New York City. And then for this to come about the way it did, it really did not do us any favors here in New York. So I think that they need to strategize. They need to conference. I don't think they know what they're doing yet.
Okay, so change of the I-9 forms, which is this is a bit ridiculous. I'm going to go through it because you might have to update the I-9 forms and e-verify, but we don't really do e-verify. But this is Gulf of America stuff, right? We're renaming the fourth checkbox in section 2 an alien authorized to work, revising the description of the two list B documents in the list of acceptable documents. Again, just using the word alien, right? Adding appropriate statutory language to the revised CHHA privacy notice to the instructions. And again, E-Verify will update citizenship status selection during case creation to reflect the statutory language selection. Non-citizen authorized to work will now appear as alien authorized to work. Maybe
Is that
they'll
in
be valid.
effect or is that just proposed yet, Sasha? Let's clarify that for
Uh,
listeners.
this is no, it will be in effect. The documents are going to be changing starting April 3rd, 2025. What? Yeah. So okay. So that was the date for it to change, but you might still find some links online that have the old language. So there's going to be some new, some old. It is what it is. Let's close with some housekeeping, and then we'll give the floor to Alyssa if she wants to say anything to our listeners. But housekeeping is that KPMG and the Department of Health announced the 2024 home care cost reports will be available May 30th. The due date for the 24 home care cost report is Friday, August 29th. And that's it. Emina, Alyssa?
I'm all set. Thanks so much, Alyssa, for joining us today. There will be more news, actually. I'm surprised you didn't want to finish up with this teaser, Sasha, stealing one of your words that you like so much. But we're going to have Alyssa back in a few weeks, in a few sessions for some important announcements, projects that Sasha's working on with Alyssa and a few other folks. So please be sure to tune in a few weeks. And then in a few days, we will be recording an episode with the OMIG Acting Inspector General, Frank Walsh. So please be sure to tune in if you are a LICSA Article 36 entity, and even if you're still hoping on continuing to do some FI work, tune in for that, because we'll be talking about some of the OMIG initiatives and what you need to be doing as a provider. Thanks so much. Sasha, do you want to close this out?
Sure. Thank you for listening. This has been the Home Care Forum podcast with your hosts, Sasha Guillaume and Emina Poricanin, special guest, Alyssa Lovelace. Have a good one.